I used to believe that I knew every sigh that echoed through our house, every hidden creak in the floorboards that danced beneath our feet, every subtle flicker of my husband's mood before it fully surfaced. I thought I knew every freckle on my son's face, how one darkened just a little more in the summer sun, and I believed, naively, that knowing those things meant I understood my life, that I was safe inside it. But that illusion shattered with the quiet kind of violence that doesn't make a sound, like glass cracking beneath a silk glove. You don't hear it. You just start bleeding. Our house had always been filled with warmth, not grand warmth, not the kind you post on social media with curated filters and matching pajamas, but real warmth. The kind that comes from late-night homework battles at the kitchen table with stale coffee and laughter, or from last-minute grocery runs where our son would beg for those terrible fruit snacks shaped like dinosaurs and we'd always cave. We had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. We had matching scars from a camping trip gone wrong and mismatched coffee mugs we refused to throw out because they meant something, even if we forgot what. I remember the way my husband, Jason, used to look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was something precious and volatile, like love and fear could live in the same glance. 10 years of marriage builds layers into a relationship. You go through money worries, sick days, bad sex, great sex, the silent dinners that somehow hurt more than the screaming fights. And somehow you still find yourself holding hands in the grocery store, making lists for tomorrow. But lately, Jason had become quiet. Not in the peaceful way that used to settle between us like a shared breath, but in the kind of silence that sounds like goodbye. He smiled less. He lingered in doorways more, staring at things that didn't need to be stared at. When our son, Leo, scored his first goal at soccer, Jason clapped late and looked surprised, like he'd forgotten he was supposed to care. Of course, I didn't say anything at first. You don't when you're in the thick of family life. You tell yourself it's stress. You blame the new manager at work, the bills piling up on the kitchen counter, the tiredness that clings to you like humidity in July. You do what women have done for centuries. You rationalize. You minimize. You give the benefit of the doubt to the man who once rubbed your back while you cried over your miscarriage at 3 a.m. The man who held your hair back while you vomited during labor, who painted the nursery that now holds more Lego bricks than actual furniture. I thought I knew every crack in this house, every sigh in his voice, every freckle on my son's face. I thought I knew my life. The night it began to truly unravel started like any other. Leo was doing math homework at the kitchen table, tongue between his teeth in concentration, his pencil tapping like a metronome for our family routine. Jason was late, again. I was stirring pasta, the kind Leo loved with too much butter and too little nutritional value, and my phone buzzed. Working late, the text said. No heart. No emoji. No follow-up. That's when I noticed his jacket was still hanging by the door, even though he'd left hours ago. The keys were missing, but the jacket, his favorite, the one he wore like a second skin, was here. My stomach clenched, not in fear, but in recognition. That subtle, traitorous knowing that blooms in your chest when your heart catches up to what your brain refuses to see. Mom, Leo said, breaking my trance. What's a reciprocal again? I turned, smiling. It's when you flip a fraction. Like 3/4 becomes 4/3. He scribbled it down, unbothered. Safe. Unaware. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't scream. It whispers. It starts with missed calls and receipts that don't match the stories. It lives in half-empty gas tanks and perfume that doesn't belong to you. That night, Jason came home smelling like spearmint gum and someone else's shower. He kissed Leo on the head, kissed me on the cheek, and told me I looked tired. I watched him walk down the hall and wondered when he'd learned to lie without blinking. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday, those quiet, midweek evenings that lull you into thinking life is steady and unshakable, that your family, your dinner table, your carefully constructed existence, are built on something solid and unbreakable. I had lit a candle, a vanilla-scented one Leo picked out at the store because it smells like waffles, and set the table with cloth napkins instead of paper, a small gesture that made the evening feel intentional, important, safe. Jason walked in late, but not unusually so. He wore that worn, unreadable expression again, the one he'd been favoring for months now, somewhere between fatigue and detachment. He kissed my cheek again, and like every kiss since autumn, it landed colder than it used to, like a formality instead of a connection. Leo was humming softly under his breath, legs swinging beneath the table, utterly unaware that the air in the room had changed the moment Jason entered it. We sat. We passed the salad. We talked about soccer practice, about a kid named Brandon who kept stealing pencils, about the math test Leo wasn't worried about because, as he proudly declared, reciprocals are my thing now. I smiled. Jason nodded. He barely touched his food. That should have been my first clue. And then, like a match dropped into gasoline, he said it. Not loud, not cruel, but direct, calculated, practiced. I need to know, he said, his voice low and even, like he was negotiating a hostage release instead of speaking to the mother of his child. I've had doubts since the beginning. About whether he's really mine. I blinked, not because I didn't understand, but because my brain refused to translate the words into meaning. For a second, all I heard was the scrape of Leo's fork on his plate, the clock ticking on the wall, and the distant hum of the dishwasher still running its early cycle. I laughed, too sharp, too sudden, like someone had pinched a nerve. You're joking, I said, forcing the laugh again, this time higher, thinner, desperate. Jason, tell me you're joking. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile. His face remained carved in stone. I'm not accusing you, he said, and that's when the world began to split. Not like a crack, but a chasm. I'm not saying you cheated. I'm just saying, there's a part of me that's always wondered. Not constantly. Not out loud. But it's there. My skin burned hot, my chest rising with a breath that couldn't seem to exit. I looked at Leo, our son, our boy, with his messy curls and spaghetti sauce mustache, laughing at a joke he'd just told himself, oblivious to the ground-giving way beneath the adults who raised him. You think I lied to you? For 10 years. I hissed the words now, my voice so low it was nearly a growl. You think I held your hand through labor and watched you cry when he was born, and all that time I was hiding something? I didn't say that, he replied, still calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, and now that it had arrived, he refused to let it veer into anything chaotic or emotional. I said I need closure. For me, this isn't about you. It's not even about Leo. It's about knowing something I've wondered for a decade. For a moment I hated him, not just in the fleeting way people sometimes hate those they love during fights or frustrations, but in a deep, bone-chilling way that made me want to throw the plate in my hand against the wall and scream until my lungs turned inside out. I didn't. I stood. I collected the dishes. I breathed. Fine, I said, my voice jagged. If you're so broken inside that you've let this fester instead of speaking to me like a man, if you're so warped by your own insecurities that the only way forward for you is to question the paternity of your child, your own son, then fine. Let's get the damn test. Thank you, he said, and that's when I lost whatever restraint I had left. Don't thank me, Jason. Don't you dare. This isn't mercy. This is war. Leo looked up then, sensing the shift, the rising tide, the danger that children can always smell before the wave hits. What's going on? He asked, his voice soft. Nothing, sweetheart, I said, kneeling beside him, wiping sauce from his chin like it was a normal night, like our lives weren't unraveling at the seams. Just a grown-up conversation. But nothing was normal after that. The days that followed were filled with the kind of tension that makes you forget how to breathe naturally. We scheduled the test for Friday. A simple swab, a sterile office, a process that felt both invasive and hollow. Leo thought it was some kind of family game. I didn't tell him what it was really about. How do you tell a 10-year-old that his father might not believe he's his father? Jason didn't speak more than a dozen words the entire week. He went to work. He came home. He existed like a ghost who still paid the bills. And me? I walked through the house like a stranger, like someone trying to remember which drawer holds the scissors, which towel belongs to who. Every photograph on the wall mocked me. Flashbacks started coming in waves, like whispered echoes I'd been too busy to hear before. That time, 3 years ago, when Jason forgot Leo's birthday. Not the party, he showed up for that, but the actual day. I'd chalked it up to a busy schedule. He was leading a new project at work. He'd apologized with cake and a remote control car that Leo loved. But now I remembered the pause when Leo had run into his arms and Jason had hesitated, just for a second, like he was being tackled by a child he didn't recognize. Or the way he looked at Leo during arguments. Not angry, not abusive, just detached. Like he was trying to summon a connection that wouldn't come. Then there was the Christmas Eve when Leo had the flu and I stayed up all night sponging his forehead. Jason had offered to help, but I told him to sleep, and he hadn't argued. At the time, I thought he trusted me. But maybe he just felt removed. There had been moments, too many to count, where Jason's silence had felt colder than absence. Moments when he chose to stay late at work rather than come home. I used to think it was stress. I used to think it was marriage, the slow settling of intimacy. But what if it wasn't? What if he's been watching Leo all these years, searching for himself and finding nothing? What if he sees the shape of another man in our son's eyes? The day of the results was a quiet one, clouded over with the kind of thick gray sky that promises rain but never delivers. I didn't go with him to pick up the envelope. I couldn't. I waited at home, pacing the length of the hallway, touching the walls like I was memorizing the feel of them before everything changed. When Jason walked in, he didn't say a word. He held the envelope like it was a piece of evidence in a trial neither of us wanted to attend. His hands shook, slightly. Just enough. "Do you want to open it together?" he asked, finally meeting my eyes. "No," I said. "You wanted this. You open it." He hesitated, then nodded, and peeled the seal open with slow, deliberate precision. I watched his face as he read. I watched the crease between his brows tighten, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, loosen. He didn't speak for a full minute. I thought I might throw up, or scream, or laugh. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were wet. "He's mine," he said, voice cracking. He's mine." I didn't respond. Not at first. Because I wasn't relieved. I wasn't even angry. I was hollowed out by the sheer violence of having to prove something that was never in question to begin with. "I know," I said quietly. "I've always known." And then I walked past him, past the man who once made me feel like home, and locked myself in the bathroom to cry. Not for joy, not for justice, but for the damage already done. Because something between us had shattered. And I didn't know if it would ever be whole again. I always believed the truth was something solid, unshakable, inevitable, waiting like a mountain at the end of every road. I believed, perhaps naively, that pain had a shape, that betrayal could be catalogued, and that love, when tested, either cracked or solidified like bone under pressure. But what I didn't know, what no one ever tells you, is that some truths are shapeless. Some truths don't break your heart in a single clean fracture. They hollow it out slowly until all that's left is an echo. It had been 3 days since Jason opened the envelope. 3 days since he sat on the edge of the bed, tears in his eyes, telling me Leo was his. That part, at least, seemed certain. But something inside me still itched. Not just from the cruelty of the accusation, not just from the loss of trust, but from a deeper, stranger discomfort that I couldn't shake. It was Leo. It was the way he looked at me that morning as I buttoned his school shirt, the way his eyes scanned my face like he was searching for something. And maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just haunted by Jason's suspicion bleeding into my own thoughts, but there was something off. Something I couldn't name. The call came just after noon. A clipped voice on the other end. A woman who didn't apologize for calling during lunch or for sounding like she was already exhausted. She asked for me by full name, asked if I could come in, said the results were inconclusive. Jason came with me, mostly because he didn't trust me to go alone. Or maybe because neither of us wanted to face whatever this was without the illusion of unity. The office was cold, sterile in that way only medical spaces can be, with chairs too firm and lighting too white, like it's trying to convince you nothing important ever happens here, just facts and figures and lab results. But something about the quiet made me nervous. The doctor came in holding another envelope. This one wasn't sealed. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He didn't offer the thin reassurances you expect from someone whose job is to tell you that everything's going to be fine, because sometimes everything isn't. Mrs. Hammond, he said, addressing me first, even though Jason sat closer to him. I'm going to ask you to sit down. I was already sitting. That should have been the first sign that things were about to spiral into a place with no map. He paused, too long. He glanced at Jason, then back to me. I understand you came in last week for a paternity confirmation, he continued. And based on that test, there was a match between Mr. Hammond and your son. Jason nodded, tight-lipped, his hand twitching slightly on his knee. However, the doctor said, our lab flagged something unusual. So we ran a secondary analysis. Silence. That awful, pregnant kind of silence that feels like the edge of a cliff you didn't know you were standing on. The doctor looked directly at me. Your son is not biologically related to either of you. I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. Because in that moment, something inside me broke, not loudly, not violently, but in the way old wood splinters under pressure. Quiet. Final. Devastating. What? I asked, but the word came out strangled, half-formed. What do you mean, not related? That's impossible. I gave birth to him. I held him in my arms. The doctor's voice was calm, detached, like this was just another day, another anomaly. But I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me, reality tilting like a house unmoored from its foundation. We verified the hospital records, he continued. You did, indeed, give birth on the date listed. But the blood work indicates that there was a mix-up. Your child may have been switched shortly after birth. Jason made a noise then, something between a laugh and a gasp, as if he'd been punched in the gut and was trying to pretend it didn't hurt. You're saying he's not ours? He asked, his voice thick with disbelief. You're saying we've been raising someone else's child for 10 years? The doctor nodded, slowly. It appears so. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. My mind was unraveling in loops, flashbacks clashing with panic, memories warping under the weight of this new truth. The way Leo used to cry uncontrollably as a baby when I tried to sing to him, even though every mother's guide insisted my voice would soothe him. The way the nurses had kept me in recovery longer than expected. The way they handed him to me already swaddled, his tiny face already unfamiliar, already other. The way Jason had questioned. The way I had laughed. The way I had insisted. God, what if I was wrong? Back at home, everything felt fake. The photos on the wall, the drawings Leo made in crayon, the baby book filled with milestones, I'd written them all down, thinking they were part of our shared history. But now each page mocked me with the sharpness of a lie I didn't know I was telling. Jason stormed through the house like a man possessed, pulling out documents, muttering about DNA kits and legal rights, and suing the hospital. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the printout the doctor had given us. Chromosomes, blood types, percentages. Scientific proof that the life I built wasn't the one I thought it was. Leo came in an hour later, backpack half-zipped, dragging his soccer cleats behind him, cheeks flushed from the afternoon sun. Hey, Mom, he said casually, like the universe hadn't shifted. I forced a smile. I nodded. I didn't speak. Because how do you tell a child, your child, the one you've kissed goodnight 1,000 times, that science says he's not yours? You don't. Not yet. That night, Jason didn't come to bed. He stayed downstairs, surrounded by legal pads and laptops, making calls to lawyers who didn't answer, reading articles written by strangers who couldn't possibly understand the weight of our particular tragedy. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting every breath, every heartbeat, as if measuring the moments before everything collapsed. Because it already had. In the morning, he told me we had a meeting with a hospital rep, some kind of administrator. Someone whose job was to say the right things, to offer apologies wrapped in caution tape. "I want to sue," Jason said. "I want to burn that place to the fucking ground." I didn't respond. Because while he raged, I mourned. I mourned the baby I had never held. The child who had my blood but not my touch. I mourned the idea that out there, somewhere, was another mother staring into a different face, wondering why her son didn't feel like hers. I mourned the memories I'd attached to Leo, his first steps, his first fever, the first time he whispered, "I love you," because now they felt borrowed. Not stolen, not fake, but borrowed. And I mourned the woman I used to be, the woman who believed that love was enough. The day after the revelation, I watched my son sleep with a kind of terror that didn't belong in a mother's heart. His breathing was soft, rhythmic, innocent. His lashes curled at the ends, catching the faint glow of his nightlight, and his mouth was slightly open the way it always was when he dreamed of running or laughing or fighting dragons in those far-off places only children could see. But I was not watching him as his mother. I was watching him like a stranger trespassing in someone else's home, peering through glass at something I was no longer allowed to claim. I didn't want to feel that. God knows I didn't want to feel that. But once someone tells you that your son doesn't carry your blood, doesn't wear your genes, doesn't mirror your cells, something in you begins to doubt every touch, every memory, every gentle ache you once thought belonged solely to you. I pressed my hand against the doorframe and breathed. Leo was still mine. No matter what. No matter who said otherwise. But the truth, God, the truth is a cruel, cold thing. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't let you sleep. It doesn't care how much love you've poured into a child's bones. It just stares at you, quiet and unmoving, daring you to look back. That morning, Jason was already up. He hadn't slept again. I found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by manila folders and internet printouts. His laptop was open to a page marked wrongful birth and hospital negligence, family legal rights. When I reached for the coffee pot, he didn't even glance at me. "We need to find him," he said, as if there had been no night between now and yesterday. "Our son. We need to know where he is." I paused, letting the weight of that sentence settle before I answered. "No," I said, calm but sharp. "We don't need anything except to protect the boy who's sleeping in our house right now." Jason finally looked up, his eyes red and sunken, his voice brittle. "He's not ours." I dropped the coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, tiny shards glinting like betrayal itself. For a long second, we both stood frozen, as if the sound of that ceramic death was louder than anything else in the room. "He is mine," I said, each word slow, deliberate, brutal. "He is mine, Jason." I carried him. I held him. I kissed his scraped knees and taught him how to tie his shoes. I stayed up all night when he had croup, remember that? I'm the one who sings to him when he's afraid of thunderstorms. So don't you dare stand in my kitchen and tell me he's not ours. Jason didn't yell back. He didn't raise his voice or slam his fists. Instead, he looked at me the way people look at gravestones, with mourning, with confusion, and with a deep, cold anger that had nowhere else to go. "You're not curious," he asked finally, quietly. "You don't want to know where the boy we made is? What kind of life he's living? What kind of parents he has? Whether he's safe, happy, loved?" I didn't answer. Because I did want to know. Desperately. I thought about him constantly, our biological son. Somewhere out there, there was a child with Jason's serious eyes and my crooked smile. A boy who might love dinosaurs or hate broccoli. A boy who might be taller or smaller than Leo, who might love books or hate school, who might call someone else mom and mean it with every part of his heart. The guilt was a cold, creeping thing. I hadn't lost a child. I'd raised someone else's. And in doing so, had someone else lost mine? The hospital arranged a meeting with their legal liaison and a social worker 2 days later. It was a sterile room with artificial light and chairs too clean to be comfortable. A folder sat in the middle of the table like a sealed confession. The woman across from us, gray suit, tight bun, eyes like glass, offered us a practiced, professional apology that felt as sincere as a voicemail from an ex. Jason leaned forward before she even finished. "We want the name of the other family," he said. "We want to reach out." I didn't move. My hands were clenched in my lap, nails digging half-moons into my palms. The woman shook her head. "That's not something we can disclose yet," she said smoothly. "We have initiated a parallel contact protocol. The other family has been informed, and if they consent, we can proceed to mediation. But you must understand, there are privacy considerations and psychological risks for the children involved." Jason exhaled sharply. I could feel the tension rolling off him like heat. "This isn't a custody case," I snapped, surprising even myself with the venom in my voice. "We're not talking about visitation rights or scheduling holidays. We're talking about children who were stolen from us, who were placed into the wrong arms because someone couldn't read a bracelet correctly." The woman nodded, her expression unreadable. "All the more reason to proceed with caution," she said. That night, Jason started building a timeline, meticulous, obsessive, filled with printouts and diagrams like we were plotting an escape from a prison made of lies. He wasn't eating. He wasn't sleeping. He was chasing ghosts. And I was breaking in silence. Because I had a secret. Leo had heard us. He hadn't said anything at first. He acted like everything was normal, watched cartoons, asked for juice boxes, gave me that same crooked smile when I packed his lunch. But one evening, as I folded laundry in his room, he stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and his eyes too wide for a child. "I'm not your real kid," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "That's what Dad said." "That I'm not yours." I dropped the shirt I was holding. "No, baby," I whispered, rushing toward him. "That's not what." "But I heard you," he interrupted, pulling away. "You were yelling. You said I don't have your blood. That I'm not really yours." I crouched in front of him, heartbreaking with every word that had already torn him apart before I ever had the chance to soften them. "You are mine," I said, trembling. "You will always be mine." "But there's another kid," he said, blinking fast, like he was trying not to cry. "A real one. Your real kid. What if you like him more?" And just like that, the bottom fell out. Because no answer would ever be enough. Not the truth. Not the lies. Not the love I had poured into his bones like water into dry earth. I pulled him into my arms and held him, tighter than I ever had before, tighter than grief, tighter than blood. "I don't care whose body you came from," I whispered into his hair. "You are my son. My soul. My heart. No one, not science, not mistakes, not the past, can ever take that away." But the crack had already formed. And once a crack starts, it doesn't stop. They called us on a Thursday morning. I remember because the coffee hadn't finished brewing yet, and Jason was in the shower, humming something tuneless and distant like he hadn't slept again. I answered the phone with a hand still trembling from too many nights of too little rest, half expecting another delay, another polite stonewalling. But the voice on the other end was different. Softer. Human. She said the other family had agreed to meet us, that they had a son. A boy the same age as Leo. A boy named Zachary. I don't remember putting the phone down. I don't remember walking to the bathroom or how I told Jason. I just remember his expression, tight, breathless, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing there's no way back to the ground he once stood on. We drove to the meeting with our hearts pulled taut like stretched wire. Neither of us spoke much. What could we say that hadn't already been dissected and buried and reanimated in the quiet hell of our own minds? There are no scripts for this. No protocols. No support groups to prepare you for the moment you meet the child you were supposed to raise. The meeting took place in a neutral office provided by the hospital, muted walls, a round table, 2 pitchers of water, and enough Kleenex boxes to wallpaper a grief counselor's office. The social worker stood by the door, a silent sentinel who looked ready for anything except what was about to happen. They entered 5 minutes late. The mother was tall, with tired eyes and a smile she couldn't quite hold. Her name was Camille. The father, Greg, had a hand on her back, gentle, steady, supportive. And the boy who stepped through the doorway between them, that boy stopped my heart. He was Leo's mirror. Not in every way. Not in the details. But in the expression. The angle of his jaw. The shape of his lips. It was like seeing a version of Leo drawn by a different artist. Same outline, different brush strokes. Zachary stood behind his parents, eyes darting across the room, locking with mine for a breathless moment before shifting to Jason. Then to Leo. And that was when it truly hit. Because Leo was staring, too. Not in confusion or fear, but in recognition. As if he saw something in Zachary that made sense in a way nothing else ever had. Camille stepped forward first. "I'm not sure how to begin," she said, her voice brittle with grief and something that might have once been hope. "But I think we owe each other the truth. And maybe something more." We sat. We talked. We cried. And it wasn't easy. Camille told us about the day Zachary was born. The complications. The brief moment she was unconscious. The nurse who switched shifts. The room numbers that were changed at the last minute. It all sounded like a bad novel, implausible, tragic, surreal. Except we were living it. And the proof was standing between us, blinking in silence. We learned about Zachary's favorite subjects, science and reading. We heard about his obsession with space documentaries and how he used to stare at the stars for hours, asking questions no one could answer. I smiled at that because Leo did the same thing when he was 6. Jason asked questions. Polite ones. Hesitant ones. Every word carried the weight of a decade lost, of memories that belonged to someone else. Camille was patient. Greg, too. But I saw it, the tightness in their shoulders, the way they leaned into their son when he spoke. They weren't ready to let go. And neither was I. Then Leo, always the quietest voice in the room, stood up. "Do you like baseball?" he asked Zachary. Zach looked surprised. "Yeah," he said. "I play shortstop." Leo grinned. "Me too." And just like that, the ice cracked. They sat together on the floor, sharing stories about favorite video games, school cafeteria disasters, and which teacher had the worst breath. Camille and I watched them, our hearts torn between awe and sorrow. And then she turned to me with a look that only another mother could understand, one that said, "I know this hurts. I know it's unfair. But look at them. Look what they've become despite everything." We agreed to take it slowly. No immediate changes. No court cases. No life-swapping fantasies. Just slow, cautious contact. Playdates. Phone calls. Maybe a shared birthday someday. The boys would choose their level of involvement. They would grow into this knowledge instead of being crushed beneath it. That night, back home, Leo sat on my lap like he hadn't in years. He didn't ask questions. He didn't cry. He just wrapped his arms around me, resting his head against my shoulder like he was trying to make space for all the things that didn't make sense. "I met the boy who was supposed to be me," he whispered. I held my breath. "And he's nice," he added. "But he's not me." I kissed his forehead. "No," I said. "He's not." Leo was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so small and steady it nearly broke me in half, he said, "You're still my mom. You'll always be." I didn't cry. Not then. I just held him tighter than I ever had before, as if the strength of my arms could undo a decade of mistakes, as if love could be the bridge between science and fate. We take walks now. All 4 of us. And sometimes 6. Leo and Zachary kick soccer balls in the park while Jason and Greg argue over who's worse at grilling. Camille and I trade parenting stories that blur the lines between what's ours and what's shared. And while there are still shadows, of course there's also light. Because biology matters. But love matters more. And in the end, when the dust settles, when the papers are filed and the hospital staff are retrained and the story fades into the archives of improbable tragedies, this remains. The boy I raised still calls me mom, and the one I didn't still looks at me with the eyes of a son. In one day, I lost everything I thought was true and found something deeper than DNA.